Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom. I'm David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman for the National Public Diplomacy Directorate here in the office of the Prime Minister. It's Thursday, the 27th of February, day 510 since the start of the October 7th war. I'll give you a quick update from me and then we'll take your questions at the end. Remember, please put your questions in the chat together with your name and your news outlet. Firstly, on the release of 4 of our murdered hostages last night to Israel after 510 days in Gaza, I can confirm the completion of the forensic identification process by the Health Ministry National Center of Forensic Medicine, together with the Israel Police and the IDF. The families and loved ones of Ohed Yahalomi, Tzachi Idan, Shlomo Mansour, and Itzik Elgarat of blessed memory were murdered. Ohed Yahalomi, Tzachi Idan, and Itzik Elgarat were murdered in captivity inside Gaza. Shlomo Mansour was murdered in the October 7th, 2023 massacre, with his body taken into Gaza and held there. These forensic results were augmented by our own intelligence. Their bodies have been returned for burial to Israel. To their families, the Prime Minister said that as a nation we are in pain, together with you, that our nation embraces you and that our nation shares in your mourning. With these releases, here is the status of our hostages still held by Hamas. 59 hostages currently remain captive in Gaza, the living and the deceased. Israel has returned 195 hostages. The Prime Minister again confirmed the moral and the ethical obligation to do everything in our power to return all of the hostages, every last one. Next to Syria, this week the IDF attacked military targets in southern Syria, including weaponry. Israel will not tolerate the presence of military equipment and forces that pose a threat to our citizens in the security area in southern Syria. We will continue to operate to remove any threat, any attempt by the regime's forces and terrorist organizations to establish themselves in the area will be thwarted. In Syria in particular, IDF forces will remain on the summit of Mount Hermon and in the adjacent buffer zone. We will remain for the foreseeable future. We will not allow the presence of the HTS organization, or a new Syrian army in the area south of Damascus. Southern Syria will be demilitarized until such time as alternative arrangements can be made. Next to Lebanon, let me update you on the situation there. Yesterday, our Air Force targeted and hit Maharan Ali Nasser al-Din. He was a significant terrorist in Hezbollah's 4400 unit. Hezbollah's 4400 unit smuggles weapons into Lebanon from Iran via Syria to rebuild Hezbollah stockpiles. Their smuggling is a clear threat to Israel's security, and it violates the understandings between Israel and Lebanon. Israel has brought Hezbollah to its knees. We are strictly enforcing the ceasefire agreement. We will not tolerate any violation and any threat from Hezbollah, and we will hold strategic points along both sides of our northern border. Why? To ensure that our communities are never again threatened by a ground invasion from Lebanon. Next to anti-terror operations in Judea and Samaria, the last week has seen our forces apprehend 75 wanted people and confiscate 17 weapons. Last night in northern Samaria, Al Yamun, 4 were arrested and 2 M16 rifles were seized. In Hebron, another 4 were apprehended and another 2 M16 rifles seized. And in Imatain, thousands of shekels worth of terror funds were also seized. This week in Jericho, several wanted were apprehended with dozens questioned suspected of terror activities. There will be no safe havens for terrorists in Judea and Samaria. This is from where murderous attacks have been launched. Iran and Hamas want more IEDs, more terror, more shootings, more suicide bombings. Israel is preventing that escalation. And finally, with the approach of Ramadan here in Israel and around the world, it remains a source of pride for all Israelis that Israel's Declaration of Independence explicitly protects freedom to practice religious beliefs, freedom for all faiths and worship, regardless of one's religion. So, whether Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Druze, no matter, the only time in hundreds of years when there has been freedom of religion and freedom of access to holy sites in this land has been since 1948 and the establishment of the State of Israel, and more specifically, since the city of Jerusalem was reunified in 1967. So, every day, over the next month, thousands are expected to arrive into Jerusalem's Old City and the surrounding areas. The overwhelming majority will come to pray and carry out the ancient customs of the holiday. They will be made welcome. Our goal this year, and indeed every year, is to ensure a safe environment for worship, freedom of worship, and we'll be working for the safe and orderly observance of the holiday. Israel prides itself that everyone will be able to mark and celebrate their holiday, including the many hundreds of mosques inside Israel, this year and every year. The government of Israel wishes a Ramadan Kareem to all those who want to worship it peacefully. Okay, so that's the end of our briefing here today. I will now take your questions. Please remember to put them in the chat together with your name and your news outlet. First question here is from Leo Soroka from the Washington Post. According to claims from the Palestinian rights groups, the UN, the operation of the West Bank is driven more by political considerations than security needs, aimed at the interests of Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition. How would you respond to that? Thank you very much for that question, Lior. Let me share with you what we're doing inside Judea and Samaria. It is from there that many terrorist operations have been planned and executed. We know that Iran, having failed miserably in its attempt to destroy this country through its proxy in Gaza, through Hamas, having failed in that mission, having failed in there with their proxy up in Lebanon, they are now seeking to do the same with terrorist organizations, Hamas and others, inside Judea and Samaria. We know this is happening. We know they've tried to step up operations, particularly smuggling weapons from Jordan into Israel, and also to ignite the area. I myself have visited some of the military operations which are happening in Judea and Samaria. Their primary purpose is to ensure that this area is not ignited by Iran, via Iran, through to its proxies, terrorist organizations in that area. There have been, unfortunately, since October the 7th and before, sadly, many terrorist attacks which have emanated from Jenin. Jenin has become effectively abandoned by the Palestinian Authority to be run by the extremists and the terrorist organizations. We simply will not allow that to happen. We were taken by surprise on October the 7th. We will not be taken by surprise again. Israel wants peaceful relations with all the people in this region, but we will not allow communities in Judea and Samaria with terrorist organizations attacking our people as they wish to do, as they say publicly, that they wish to do, which is why The Prime Minister and the government have stepped up operations, and we will stay there indefinitely until such time as the threat of terrorist attack on our country recedes. Okay. By the way, Leo, that is precisely what every other country in the world would do. We're simply not going to wait to be attacked again from these terrorist organizations. Next question is from Joel Pollock at Breitbart News. With phase 1 over, will there be phase 2? And number 2, is Israel risking the future of negotiations by holding on to Philadelphia corridor? Okay, let me take those two questions together, Joel. We've spoken about what the objectives of this war have been. We've mentioned them many, many times before. They are, of course, to get all of our hostages home, every single one. And that is the commitment of the Israeli government to ensure that Gaza can never again be a threat to this country, and to destroy Hamas's governing and military capability. There is no scenario. The Prime Minister has made this crystal clear, and he speaks on behalf of the entire nation. There is practically wall-to-wall support for all of these objectives, but allowing Hamas to continue in Gaza is simply not an option. Now, let me answer your question specifically. The Prime Minister has today authorized a delegation to go to Cairo to take forward negotiations to get our hostages home. Okay, that is what the Prime Minister has done, because we want to bring them all home. It is our moral obligation. It is our ethical obligation. We need to bring them home right now, as soon as possible, as soon as humanly possible. Okay, let me take another question here from Samuel Faure from Le Monde newspaper in France. Would Israel support the formation of a Druze force in southern Syria? Thank you for that question, Samuel. The Prime Minister and the government have made clear that all minority rights should be protected in Syria. It is a key test. It is the key test of HTS in control of Syria, that minority rights are protected. We know the provenance of HTS. We know that they're born out of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We know that they welcomed the October 7th massacre. We know that they are jihadists. One of our ministers has described them as wolves in sheep's clothing. Many in the international media have been charmed by them because Al-Jilani puts on a suit and tie. But we believe in actions rather than words here. We, here in Israel, we're not going to let Syria become a staging ground for attacks against us. Our forces will remain in key positions along our border with Syria for as long as necessary to protect our security. And specifically on the Druze, let me tell you that this is a key test for the new Syrian administration, the new regime. It is a key test to see how they protect the rights of their Druze inside Syria. This is of key relevance to us here in Israel, because we dearly love our own Druze community. We dearly love our own Druze community. They fight alongside our soldiers. They have died alongside our soldiers in this war for our very existence, and they have made sacrifices again and again and again, showing their loyalty to this country. And because our Druze here in this country have family inside southern Syria, it is an obligation for the Syrian regime to protect their minorities. And again, I say, the world is watching if what they say is genuine by how they treat their minorities, the Druze being key amongst them. I hope that's clear enough, Samuel. Hannah Julian from the Jewish Press. Is there any truth to the report that more hostages are to be freed from Gaza this Saturday? Thank you for that question, Hannah. I'm not sure why you ask a question of me like that, having been part of these briefings for as long as you have been, but let me tell you that the Prime Minister today, just as we came on air, authorised for a delegation to leave for Cairo today to take forward these discussions. We want to bring home more hostages. Again, Hamas could release them now, right now. They could release them right now. None of us are surprised, of course, that they don't, because of the appalling way which they have dealt with the release of our hostages, parading the bodies of dead babies. Dead babies. That still shakes me to my very, very core. Okay. Hamas is a genocidal terrorist organization, and we are trying to get our people out. Next question here is from Hannah Leshinsky from All Israel News, with a declaration that it won't withdraw from Philadelphia. Has Israel officially closed the door on the possibility of phase 2 ceasefire? And second question is the idea of creating a permanent post in the Sumerian refugee camps and preventing the return of their residents. Thank you for that question, Hannah Leshinsky from All Israel News. I believe that I've answered the question on Philadelphia. I've got nothing more to add, particularly on Philadelphia. But as I said, one of our Prime Minister's authorised a delegation to go to Cairo today to take forward discussions. And when it comes to the next phase of these discussions, look, these discussions on a permanent ceasefire, we've been having them ongoing with our US partners. They've been ongoing for quite a while now. And in reality, we keep getting asked phase 1, phase 2, and etc. These discussions have never really ended. Yes, we know they are difficult, but we are committed to getting all of our hostages home and achieving all the other war aims. And this war will not end until we've met all of our goals in this war. And of course, the ultimate goal is a permanent ceasefire. Hamas must not, will not be in power in Gaza. The future of Gaza must be demilitarized and de-radicalized. That is why the Prime Minister has stated again, as recently as yesterday, that President Trump's plan, his out-of-the-box thinking, are very much welcomed here in Israel. And as famously as Einstein said, repeating the same failed policies and expecting a different outcome is the definition of insanity, which is why we welcome so much President Trump's out-of-the-box thinking. Okay, another question here. If you could just go up a bit. There's another question here from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa recently reiterated threats to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in accord with the ICC warrant. Will Israel ask for Ramaphosa and his government to be sanctioned and arrested for their own corruption and human rights violations? Thank you for that question, Joel. Unfortunately, the South African government is repeating the same failed policies of many Arab nations, seeking to divert their own shortfalls, problems, corruption, dictatorial behavior by seeking to promote sanctions or divert attention to Israel. We see through it. The world sees through South Africa's actions. We know that they're under the orbit far too close to Russia and also to the Iranian government, which is why their position is extremely regrettable. And I know that the US administration and President Trump in particular is looking at this extremely closely. Okay, next question from George Dastis from EFE, the Spanish news outlet. Are there any more about restrictions placed on access to the Temple Mount during Ramadan? Thank you for that question, George. Please take a look at my briefing I've just given, where we spoke about Israel's commitment of freedom of access for all religions in this country. Peaceful access. We're asking, and that will continue this year as they have in every year. Your question is some sort of fear-mongering, which we are quite used to, but it doesn't change the reality of the fact that there is a lot of fear-mongering, and it's done by extremists and by terrorist elements seeking to ignite Jerusalem. There will be no restrictions except for safety, because there are hundreds of thousands of people which will go and pray in Jerusalem during this holy month. We will, of course, maintain public order, and we ask all of the people who are celebrating Ramadan, commemorating Ramadan, that they will have access, but of course we welcome all peaceful visitors. What we cannot, of course, and no country would countenance, is people seeking to foment violence and attacks on anyone else. These sites will be open. The usual restrictions for public safety will be in place, as they have been every year, but no one should fall for the terrorists' attempt to ignite the situation over Ramadan. It won't work, and people should see through these transparent efforts. And finally, last question here is from Fred Ager. Israel's defense minister talk about Hamas plotting attacks on soldiers and communities even during the ceasefire. Could you please elaborate more on this issue and the consequences of phase 1 and phase 2 of the ceasefire, and what military and political response should this call for? Do you plan to extend phase 1 of the ceasefire to release more hostages instead of moving into phase 2? Thank you for that question, Fred. We've made clear why Israel's taken the action it is taken in Judea and Samaria. We know that Iran, we know that Hamas are trying to ignite the area constantly, even more so after their failed attempts to destroy this country via Hamas and via Hezbollah and via the Houthis and via the Shia militias in Iraq. All of those efforts have failed. And the Prime Minister is right when he talks about the achievements of this war. They are indeed tremendous, thanks to the heroic work and sacrifice of our soldiers. Hamas has been massively degraded. 20,000 of their terrorists have been eliminated. 90% of their rocket capability has been destroyed. Hezbollah's leadership has been wiped out. Its strategic capabilities degraded. Iran has been weakened. Its missile defenses seriously degraded. Its long-range missile production has been set back, and their vulnerability has been exposed. And all of this, we know, of course, Fred, led to the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria. So it's thanks to the heroism and the bravery and the sacrifice of our soldiers. The Prime Minister has talked about yesterday that Israel is reshaping the Middle East. The Prime Minister spoke about total victory. That is something we believe in this country. And it will result, after all this, in a more peaceful future. But we are not done yet. Now, as I said, the delegation has been sent to Cairo today, and I won't be negotiating in public, but our priority, of course, is to get our hostages home together with the other war aims. Okay, that is the last question, I believe. Thank you for joining us here today. We'll have another briefing again shortly, and in the meantime, please do stay safe. You can contact us in the usual way, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.